Welcome to everyone. My name is Tasha Brown, and I am within Meditation Special Projects Manager, as well as an occasional teacher. And I'm here today with three of our other teachers, Kim Nicol, Kelsey Lettko, and Ranga Jayawardena. And we are here to discuss limiting beliefs. And we'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about what that is and why we've chosen this theme. But I'd like to pass it off to Ranga right away to help us all just arrive, be here together, let go of where we've been, and let go of where we're going after, and kind of rest together here. So Ranga, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Tasha. Yeah, so we'll just do 2 to 3 minutes of meditation here. So I invite you to come into a comfortable posture and spread your awareness throughout your whole body. So we're just taking a moment here to feel what it's like to be you right now. To feel your presence and to allow your energy, your awareness, your presence to collect in the body. And I often encourage folks to, whenever they're listening to Dharma or wisdom that's being shared, to keep one eye open on the body. And so this allows us to receive that wisdom and to see how it touches us, how it moves us.
Thank you so much, Ranga. I kind of went deep there. I appreciate it. Well, again, I want to just welcome everyone here, everyone watching on watching later, everyone here on Zoom. And I speak on behalf of myself and the other teachers here when I say that we're so happy you're sharing this space with us and joining us for a conversation about limiting beliefs. So we're going to talk about what they are, where they typically come from, how normal it is to have them, and how meditation can help us break free from them, can be a part of that process. Before we dive in, though, I would love to ask each of the teachers to talk a little bit about themselves, their journey with meditation and being a teacher. So I'll go ahead and pass it off. Maybe Kelsey, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks, Tasha. My name is Kelsey, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. This is going to be such a beautiful space to share with people. But my pathway to the yoga, or to the meditation world started with yoga. I did my yoga teacher training in 2016. And that was the first time that I really kind of stopped moving in my adult life and got off the track that I had been running on. And a lot happened in that moment, or in that space. I was able to just kind of be away for 3 weeks in the jungle with a lot of rain and a lot of lizards. And my teacher kind of showed me an alternative way of doing life, or a new way of doing life that just spoke really true to me. So yeah, that kind of started me on my path towards yoga, into meditation. My primary way of being and working with folks in the world is via life coaching, and I'm also in school right now for hypnotherapy. So I love playing in the land of limiting beliefs and really getting down deep to see where they come from, how we might rewrite them, and really taking an active approach to choosing if we want to hang on to these beliefs or not. So I love partnering with Within Meditation. A lot of the work I do with Within is either through moving meditation classes. So I teach kind of part chair yoga, part guided meditation. And I also partner with Devin Pipers to lead a lot of our corporate workshops that bring together coaching tools and meditation. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with you both, all of you. All of you.
Thank you, Kelsey. And maybe Ranga, would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just want to say it's such a privilege to be here and lovely to hear about the other teachers' backgrounds. Yeah, so my name's Ranga. I've been practicing meditation since I was about 10 years old. So it's been a little over 20 years now. And I was, very fortunate as a young kid to be exposed to many meditation masters, primarily from the Theravada school of Buddhism. So this is an ancient school coming from India. And growing up as a Sri Lankan Buddhist, I was lucky enough to meet many monks in particular. So my journey started there. And as I got older, my interest branched off to all kinds of different traditions, both secular and non-secular, through Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, and over the last 4 years or so, Taoism. So Chinese medicine, acupuncture, acupressure, gua sha, cupping, herbs, all of that is now a big part of my practice. Yeah, and I started teaching about 4 years ago, and for actually maybe it's 5 years now, I'm not sure, but for several years I just sort of taught for free on weekday evenings as I was sifting through a corporate career and a career co-founding companies. And then, sometime over the last couple of years, really this yearning arose to teach and to share what I feel is the most valuable gift that I've ever been given, which is all of the above that I mentioned. Any dharma, any spiritual tradition that invites us to find peace and freedom. So yeah, I partnered with Within actually earlier this year. And like Kelsey, a big part of what I do is life coaching. And yeah, hopefully that serves as a good introduction. It's lovely to be here, and I'm very grateful for Within for this opportunity.
And my name is Kim. I love being a part of the meditation community at Within, in part because I love getting to meet actually all of the different teachers, because I often don't unless we're having these conversations. So that's such a treat. But also for me, I came into meditation through community experience. So I've always had this strong belief in the value of meditating together and with others and talking about your experience and gathering insights through this very relational process, as opposed to something that I think can sometimes feel very isolating. So for me, when I first encountered meditation, well, and actually what I'll share, so I grew up in what was often referred to as a very hippie town. Like, it's got a history and it's got a reputation of being kind of this granola hippie town. And so for me growing up, meditation also always seemed like this thing. This was my thought. This is this thing that kind of weird people do. And so what's interesting is that when I first was introduced to it, it was through a friend. I was working corporate, and she said, there's this class that I'm taking with this wonderful meditation teacher. I think you would like it. And I had all of these beliefs, all of these ideas about who goes to meditation, about what happens when you're there. I thought, you have to sit on the floor. I just had this image in my mind that that's a required part of it. And I had all these ideas about what I thought meditation was. And so I said no. And she kept inviting me. She said, no, I think you're really going to like it. I think I just get this idea that you would like it. So finally, after being invited multiple times, I said, fine, I'll go. And I went kind of not expecting to really enjoy it, thinking I would have to kind of endure this experience, for my friend. But what happened was I got there, and it turns out like you can sit in a chair and meditate. I didn't know that at the time. It seems so basic now, but honestly, I had this belief that really limited me, that prevented me from exploring kind of what was possible and what was there. And what I found was the most interesting part of that meditation experience for me was not simply being in a guided practice and beginning to notice, oh, I have these thoughts that are always kind of running. There's this internal narrator that has a lot to say about me, about other people, about the world. And as I became more able to just kind of notice that, then I was able to shift my relationship to it and become more mindful and more intentional. And it just kind of opened this new way of experiencing myself in my life in relationship with others. And then, of course, after the guided practice, we would then have a conversation with our teacher. And it was so interesting. And I had no idea that meditation would be so interesting, because my belief was that it's a boring thing that you do, like you sit quietly in silence until like a bell rings or something. And so partly I love this conversation and topic because I think the question of, what is a limiting belief? How do we work with that? What does that mean? I think hits on so many levels for us as humans. And of course, that was like maybe 10 years ago. And so now I love sharing my practice with others. I also am a coach. I work with a lot of new managers and new leaders because there's a huge mindset shift that is often overlooked in that kind of part of your career. And I love supporting and helping people thinking about their, who they are, what they do, how they do it at that stage of what they're going through. So that's a little bit about me and why I love this topic, and I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing about your background and your journey with meditation and teaching. And thank you, Kim, for kind of starting us off on this topic already with your story about how meditation landed for you the first time. And I would just ask you to kind of expand on that now and really pull apart what is a limiting belief beyond the one that you mentioned in your story, and kind of where do they come from?
Yeah. Okay. Here's how I'll start to answer this. And then I'm super curious to hear from Kelsey and Ranga how you think of and describe it. So the way I think of it is a belief is simply a thought or an idea that you agree with. That's it. It's a thought or idea that you, on some level, you agree with it. And then limiting is the question of what is the effect of that agreement? What is the effect of holding that belief, of agreeing with it? So for example, for a long time, I had this really persistent belief that I was a failure in my legal career because I chose not to practice law. I became a lawyer, did all the work, got all of the, accreditation, got my bar number, did all of that hard work, and then I chose a different path. And for a long time, there was this kind of thought in the back of my mind that I failed to kind of fulfill what my intention was, right? Like if you get a degree in something, the belief was you should go do that thing now because you've spent all this time and money. And if you don't, there must be something wrong with you. Maybe nobody wants you. Maybe you couldn't cut it. Like there are all these questions about why that didn't happen. And it was kind of in the background, kind of like if you know the story of Princess and the Pea, there's like this little, hard thing underneath all of the levels of softness, and you just kind of feel it. And it just kind of feels like something just doesn't feel quite right. And so one of the results of that, of having that agreement, was I had a pretty persistent inner critic. It really affected the way I saw myself in the world and the way I kind of showed up to my relationships. And it was actually through the process of being in conversation one day with my meditation group and community, and I shared this, and it felt super vulnerable. This thought, like, I secretly feel like I'm a deep, deep failure, and I'm always trying to prove myself out of this thought that I agree with on the background. And what's so interesting is that when I shared that, one of the other students reflected back and was like, I don't know, Kim, I think that's not true. Like, I think it shows that, you go after what you want, that you make decisive value-based decisions, that your path looks different than others, and that's actually fine. And it was that kind of reframing that was like, oh, that's so interesting. And with that awareness, that shift of, oh, that if I'm not choosing to agree with this story about what it means that I chose this career path instead of this one, now all of a sudden I don't feel kind of the burden or the kind of self-imposed restriction or limitation. I'm no longer making decisions based on trying to overcome this kind of background thought. So, again, to kind of sum it up, it's like a belief is simply an idea that on some level you agree with. And then whether or not it is limiting is the question of what is the effect on you of holding this. And the last thing I'll share is that those thoughts and those beliefs, some of them are inherited, meaning they are given to us by other people in our family, in our community, in our culture. Some of them we kind of create ourselves as a way to try to explain, like this happened, it must be because of this reason. And so part of the, learning how to see them and just questioning, like, what is the effect? It becomes very interesting. I will pause. I would love to hear from some of the other instructors on that.
Often for a moment, Kim, just tangentially, very quickly, it's so interesting to hear you share that, because I don't know if you even know this, but you were a huge expander for me very early in my career. I worked at the front desk of a big tech company at the time and ran our perks program, and we hired Kim to come in and teach meditation classes. And that was one of the first times that I was like, oh my goodness, there's another way. And I remember one day we were just chatting at the front desk and you had shared how you had chosen this path kind of like over your legal career. And it just blew my mind and inspired me so deeply. So it's so interesting to hear that you are holding that belief, and unbeknownst to you, you were one of my very first expanders. I think it was right. It was like pre-yoga teacher training, but that really interesting spot of just like, okay, what am I actually doing here? And there you were. So thank you for not letting that belief hold you back, because you really were such a huge expander for me. So I just wanted to share that, because you do play a very special role in my career. So it's really cool to get to be sharing this conversation. But I think of limiting beliefs as almost these little bars on our invisible cage. And to echo Kim, yeah, we learned them. We picked them up from even small moments growing up that we witness how people are to each other, how people respond to us. And I kind of like the image of a little bar on a cage, or like a little tiny ceiling that we might not even know is there, because then once we do see it, it's like, well, maybe I could just like scooch this out of the way. And what might happen? Could I take up more space? Could I move in this direction in my life? And yeah, and back to my Kim story, I think it's really beautiful when other people show us that those bars on our cage don't actually have to be there. Like I had a really strong limiting belief around, I can only make money following this certain type of path. I can only have a successful career, whatever that is, following this certain type of path. And then to start seeing so many people in my world reflect back to me like, no, that's actually not true. That was a really powerful earlier way for me to start examining my cage and kind of even seeing it for the first time. So yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear the connection there, and how Kim kind of helped Kelsey, and the connection between Kim's limiting belief and Kelsey's limiting belief. Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, I think there's one phrase that comes to my mind as I listen to both of you. It's, with our views, we build the world. And I really feel that, with our views, our experience of who we are, of what the world is, of what time is, of what, the story of our lives, it's built by our views. And, Kim was talking a bit about limiting views on what meditation is all about. And I think we should probably spend some time on that topic today. But, for me, expanding what meditation is all about is really, really important. So one of the things that comes from this practice of simply, spreading awareness and creating what I call chitta sensitivity, which means sensitivity to our heart, like really listening to what's going on in the heart. Is so powerful because we come into awareness of our views, and we hold millions of views, and constantly what we're experiencing in the present moment is actually directly linked and never separable from the views that we hold. So yeah, with our views we build the world. And the other thing that comes to my mind here is there is no view that is inherently true. And this is linked to a teaching on what's called emptiness or sunyata from the Buddhist tradition, but it's in many other traditions. So in this idea, there's no view or belief that is inherently true, that is on its own valuable, meaningful, true. And in other words, we have full flexibility in terms of what we believe and how we view ourselves in the world. And this is where meditation to me gets really, really interesting, because we can become sort of like wizards, where we're putting in a magical spell or dropping something into the cauldron, and our entire experience changes. So I love this idea of mindset coaching. And I think when I think about meditation, it's been for me a path of finding relief and freedom from the views that cause suffering in my life. Yeah, so I'll pause there.
What I'm hearing from all of you that I think is really neat is that from Kim and Kelsey, I kind of heard that piece of what some of the common limiting beliefs are, like I should do this, or um, or I'm not good enough. And a lot of those are fear-based. And then Ranga, what you're talking about is where meditation can take us and expand us to get beyond those limitations and that fear. And so I'd love for you all to even take it further and talk a little bit about how meditation can do that. How does it help us identify these limiting beliefs? And how does it take us beyond them? What are some of the practices, or what are the things that you've seen in your lives, and how meditation has played a role in that way?
Yeah, maybe I'll say a little bit on this. Thank you so much, Tasha. Yeah, so for me, meditation, there's this teacher named Thanissaro Bhikkhu from the Thai forest tradition, who said that, as human beings, we have this incredible capacity to understand. And isn't it ironic that we don't understand our own minds? Right? So when we turn this engine, this capacity of understanding inwards, which is a lot of what this movement of meditation is all about, we start to understand what's going on under the hood, in the heart, in the place in our being that feels, that is touched and affected by things. So it's sort of like turning the lights on, and we get to see what's there. So that's, to me, that's like briefly how meditation can help us come into contact and help us identify what views we actually hold. And I'll also say that I think teachers are very, very helpful in this regard, because it's often hard for us to see our own limiting views. We can see them, but having a good teacher goes a long way. And I actually want to spend, the second part of the question to me, I think, is really, really interesting. How does meditation help us break through limiting views? Because sometimes we're aware that, there's something that we're doing that is creating limitations, but we don't know how to break it. So meditation is a practice, and I love the word practice. It's like we have a default view of looking at the world, and when we meditate, we start to, it's like boom. Sometimes we can just get to this view, right? But then we come back to this default view. So it's like we go here, we keep kind of doing this, and over time the view gradually shifts. So one example is in relation. I'll just give a quick personal example with me and my wife. And I think meditation is very helpful when it comes to relationships. So my wife was viewing me, like, early on in our relationship, as someone who goes to the extreme with things, which is, in a way that's true. There's some truth to that view, right? So for example, when it comes to health or my meditation routine, I can be very extreme. And so she was always advocating for me to be more balanced. And then we one day, after, like, actually probably over a year of, like, us looking at each other in this way, I shared that for me, it's like, it's discipline. It's not being extreme, it's discipline. And just that simple reframing really helped. And I was looking at her as lacking discipline, So it's like, as people, we have our own views and we look at the world through this lens. And so I actually came to see how she doesn't lack discipline. She goes at a different pace, but she's way more thorough than me. So I began to sort of respect her thoroughness and to feel that she's on her own journey, right? And this took practice. So it was literally like every time that thought would pop up in my head of looking at her in a certain way, it's like, no, that's not how I need to look at her, and just injecting that new view. And over time, that practice becomes our default way. Yeah.
I love that, Ranga, what you shared, for a couple of reasons. And I was taking notes. Okay. I love what you said earlier too about the awareness of heart and the emotional aspect of the practice. What I've found, I want to kind of like amplify part of what I heard, especially around relationships. And maybe the way I'll do that too is share a story. So when I meditate, I'll make it specific to me. Part of what is super helpful is it helps me become more aware of what is the story that I'm telling about myself, about other people, about how I think I should be, about how I think they should be, about, my opinion about everything. So first, there's this teaching in many traditions of meditation around acceptance. Can we be present to and accept what is here right now? What is arising? And for a long time, I thought, acceptance means acquiescence and kind of giving up, right? Because I think that's often how we use that word, as like a kind of a passive giving up, like a relinquishing of responsibility. And what meditation really helped me to understand through my work with my teacher is that, no, actually acceptance is the place where we kind of stop fighting reality, where we actually embrace, like, this is what's here. And now what? Now that I can see and kind of accept, yeah, like, this is what's here. Now I get to ask, and what next? And that creates that space of choosing, of being in a more active relationship as opposed to a reactive relationship. So first, meditation really helps me to slow down and just observe, what are the stories I'm telling in my mind? What are the emotions that I'm experiencing in my heart, in my emotional space? How is my physical body responding to all of that? And for a lot of folks, if we're in a state of chronic anxiety or stress or bracing, it can become so normalized, we stop noticing it. But if the story we're telling is, I can't let myself get close to this person because they could leave, right? Like, or the story of, I used to have the story, I had commitment issues. That was my story. I have commitment issues. And when you're in your story, it seems so true. And it is so helpful for an outside perspective, whether it's a teacher, a coach, whomever, to question that, to reflect that back. And what I gained from my teacher is, he's like, I don't think you have commitment issues. I think you want to feel free. And I think until you realize that actually commitment can give you more freedom, I think you're always going to have these relationship patterns where you're either questioning someone or you're not fully invested in the relationship. And I'm currently in the best relationship of my life. It's been almost 6 years. And at the very beginning, I felt that kind of fear again of, I really like him. I'm afraid he's going to leave. So I don't want to get too invested or too attached, because I'm protecting myself in advance from the story that I am generating in my mind that is creating real emotions that I'm then making decisions about. which is a really hard place to start a relationship if you've got that going on. And what happened was I became aware I have this fear that if I get close to this person, he might leave me, and then I will feel like so sad. And so once I saw that story, I actually then was able to tell him and say, I want to be honest, like my big fear as we're getting to know each other, this is my big fear. And he's like, oh, and the thing is I didn't require him. I feel like past me would have then wanted his reassurance. Oh, that won't happen. I will never leave you. But what I realized and came to accept was, you know what? He might one day. He might decide he wants to be with someone else, or he might decide his life is going in another direction. Or you know what? I might decide that. That's a thing that could actually happen in all the possibility of the world. And if I know that that could happen, and if I accept that, I would feel really sad about it. Now I actually don't need to feel like I'm walking on eggshells or trying to be like good, good to make him stay. Like I don't have to try to control what's happening. If I can see the story, accept that, yeah, that would really hurt. And I don't want to live my life or create a relationship that is built around this one possible fear. And I really credit my meditation practice with having the ability to generate that awareness. Because I think just like Ranga, you said, it does become more available, more accessible, that awareness kind of in real time to observe, wow, I have this story or a perspective or a judgment. And because of that, it's creating all these emotions. And because of that, I'm then creating these behaviors. And it's like, oh, this is fascinating. And then to ping off Kelsey, like, what would happen if I just faced the fear, acknowledged it? Maybe it could be different. And it has been, and it's been awesome.
You both said so many brilliant things. I'm never going to be able to connect all these dots here, but first, I am so excited for both of your relationships, for really benefiting from awareness of these stories and these beliefs, and your willingness to really choose, is this a belief that I want to hold? And Kim, I want to come back to what you mentioned about choice. I think the way that I really use meditation, I guess, is to come back to that place of awareness. And one of my favorite quotes is that Viktor Frankl quote, between the stimulus and response, there is a choice. In that choice, I'm going to butcher it, but essentially lies the opportunity for our growth and our freedom. And I think of meditation as giving us that practice of seeing that space between ourself and the thought, or ourself and the situation that is lying in front of us right now. And I think that why I love pairing meditation with a change, like any type of change work, whether it's coaching, whether it's hypnotherapy, whether it's something else, is because we get that practice to sit in that space between of, okay, here I am. I am clearly aware that I have this belief, that I'm telling myself this story. Is that a story that I actually want to build my life on? And sometimes it can be really terrifying to actually admit, like, no, that isn't a belief. Okay, well, now what? To your point, Kim, now if I accept that this is here, this isn't what's actually true to me, what is here? And to me, I think that's a really fun part of the conversation, is what's next when we do decide to move past that limiting belief. And coming back to what you were saying, Kim, once we become aware of some of these stories, sometimes there's like stories on top of stories on top of stories. And one of my favorite practices that you already touched on is the practice of yes and. It's, well, yes, maybe he might leave. And do I want that to stop me from engaging in this relationship anyways? No. Okay, cool. So with yes and, it's kind of a way to start to name our beliefs. Okay, yes, I have this belief. And what do I want to do about it? What's that next step? Instead of it just kind of like being that bar, being that ceiling to keep us where we are. So yeah, so much brilliance around what y'all are saying. I'm going to stop it there.
Okay, so something else that's coming to mind, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on. So we've been talking a lot about our interior experience of our beliefs. And one of the notes I made that I wanted to bring into our conversation is also acknowledging sometimes we bump up against the limiting beliefs of others. And that can be cultural, that can be in the context of like implicit or unconscious bias. And just as one example, so it used to be believed that women were not physically capable of running a marathon, because if you did, your uterus would fall out, like your internal organs would be damaged. Like they were physically, it was like not allowed. Like Western medicine had this belief, right? And like a lot of people, they had this idea, a lot of people agreed with it. And it wasn't until, so in 1967, was the very first time a woman ran in the Boston Marathon. And she signed up under, I think she either signed up under her brother's name or her name was kind of gender ambiguous. And when she was there, the race officials actually tried to physically like pull her out. And it was a big deal because there was this kind of standing belief, which then turns into a rule, a policy decision about kind of what's allowed, how we do things. And I find this really helpful because sometimes I think what can happen, especially if you're a person who has bumped up against the kind of cultural or implicit bias, it can be easy to internalize that, to think, oh, like people are treating me this way, so maybe this is true about me. Or people don't see me as capable of this. They're probably right. I am probably not capable of this. And so when we're thinking about, what is the effect of limiting beliefs, I think it is also helpful to acknowledge that there's the internal part, and it also shows up kind of in the world through what becomes like policy or legislation or rules about things. And it can, I think, also be really helpful for meditation as a practice to notice sometimes like, is this kind of the water I'm swimming in? Is the reason I'm holding this story because it's the story I see presented and reflected to me? And that can also then sometimes create this other challenge or just awareness of, if I'm going to unhook myself, if I'm going to decide I don't want to believe this about myself anymore, that also might come with a feeling of grief or disloyalty if it's something that feels like it's going against people you love, right? Or if it goes against like the culture in which you were raised, whether it's around gender roles or expectations about being married or becoming a parent or career or whatever. And I think it, like for me, meditation too has been helpful to also understand, oh, right, some of these stories, it's the water I'm swimming in. And that's also part of what can feel challenging when it's, how do I shift this thought and not feel like I'm being disloyal to something or someone that I also value and hold with great, respect and care.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. It's so cool what we're talking about here, and I have so much appreciation for this woman that you're describing, the first woman to go run this marathon. And it actually reminded me of another running story. My understanding is that there was a time where folks didn't believe that a mile could be ran at a 4-minute pace. And so it took a long time. And then when the first person broke that barrier of 4 minutes, a ton of people started breaking it, right? It's just because mentally it's a barrier of like 4.00, right? And yeah, I think this is really interesting, the idea of what others believe and the sort of like energy of like we're sensitive beings. And we live in a world where there's multiple cultures, multiple beliefs, and we are impacted by them for sure. And one very common experience as someone is diving into the world of meditation is feeling the resistance of others, because this is sort of in a different direction than the way most people move, right? So that ability to sort of listen to your own voice and embrace who you really are in the midst of that contention with cultural views and cultural beliefs is really important. You know, one of the most important and helpful things that a spiritual teacher ever told me was said to me by this woman named Willa Reed, who's a Kiwi. She's from New Zealand, and she's a pretty well-known Buddhist teacher, and she told me, feel your own authority. Feel your own authority on the spiritual path and in relation to this process of waking up, what's called enlightenment in Buddhism. And it was so powerful for me. And I realized, you know, I've taken a lot of time now to feel what that means. And I realized that for me, I had inherited limiting beliefs from spiritual teachers, and many amazing spiritual teachers that I have immense respect for. But there was this thing of giving them authority, right? And it's really normal for us to do. We give our authority to leaders, to whether it's spiritual leaders in my case, or coaches if you're an athlete, or whatever it is, right? And it occurred, one of the things that occurred to me over time is that she was a woman telling me this. And how did she find her way to this? And she actually was formally ordained as a Buddhist monk in the Thai forest tradition, so an ancient school of Buddhism coming from Thailand that's very male dominated. And I could really appreciate that, you know, that she had to find that herself. Yeah, so to give some examples of this, for me, it's like, even what you believe enlightenment is, if you're interested in that, right? So the very notion of enlightenment, well, one teacher says it's this, you know, the Buddha said it's this in one tradition. In a different tradition, like in Tibet, the Buddha's description of enlightenment is totally different, right? Yeah, so this idea of feeling your own authority and listening to the heart, to the part of you that is affected, is so important, and I feel will allow you to break through these barriers. And over time, your life will start to feel yours. It'll start to feel authentic. Yeah, so thank you, Kim, for bringing up that topic.
Yeah, I'm so glad you moved us in that direction. It's so important to acknowledge this. And I honestly don't know if it's talked about enough. I almost think about it as the heartbreak that comes from really following our own, if you want to call it intuitive guidance or whatever it is, or really choosing like, wow, this belief is not in alignment with me. But to your point, what happens if this is a belief that my whole family built their lives on? What does that mean for me? And it's something that I talk a lot about with my clients around, like, yeah, this can be a heartbreaking journey. It's the most beautiful journey I think we could ever go on in our lives, to go inward and to free ourselves from what does not actually ring true to our hearts, to our souls, to our intuition. And I think there is a lot of heartbreaking questioning that can come up with that. It can feel quite isolating sometimes, I think, to start to remove these. If you're doing this work and maybe no one else in your community is, that can be lonely. And to your point, that's where teachers come in. That's where communities come in. It's so powerful to have other people who are also walking this path. So you can say, okay, I'm not alone in this. There are others doing this work. So I think community work, sitting together in Sangha is so powerful for this. And what was I going to say, Ranga? And something that you said brought up something, and it came and it went. But it came and it went, so I'll let it go. But the last thing I'll say, I'm not sure if you guys have seen the movie Maverick, the new Top Gun movie. Watching that movie, I was like, this is a brilliant example of the power of being shown that a belief isn't true. When Maverick steals the plane and he shows the route can be flown in under 2 minutes or whatever, and then suddenly they could do it. It's exactly what you're speaking to with the running examples. Once we see that it is possible, that we can do this, I think the next layer of that has really changed my life is I used to see someone like Kim, I'll use the example with your beautiful career. I saw that at first displayed to me and was like, oh, I could never do that. But what happens when we start to see something that's being done? And that next thought is, well, what if I could do something like that? What if that's possible for me too? So I think sometimes there can be layers of breaking through these beliefs, okay, yes, I see that it could be done, but what if it's also possible for me too? So yeah, I just thought that acknowledging the resistance that you're saying, Ranga, the potential heartbreak that comes with this, and the deep excitement of the journey it's all yes. And I think it's also present in this conversation. And I love that, okay, well, cool. I'm seeing someone else do it. What if that's possible for me too? So I just want to add that in.
I love that. And I also want to like tie that to what Ranga, you said earlier about, I can't remember the exact language, but it was how we create through what we see. Like what we see is the way that we create the world that we live in, or the experience we have of it. Because that also really resonates with me both on a personal level and then professionally, right? Because we often think that what we see is all there is. And then we meet someone who's doing something differently, and it's like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. I didn't even know that was available. I didn't even know that was possible. And now that the possibility, the idea of it is in my mind, sometimes it just lands like a seed, and it might kind of simmer there for a little while and start to grow out these little roots. And then you start to expand more. It's like, oh yeah, because I didn't see it. We sometimes hear, especially in conversations around representation, like if you don't see it, you can't be it, or something like that. Like that's part of the importance of like diversity of role models, or diversity of leaders that actually reflect kind of the people that they are representing, or speaking on behalf of. Is that it makes a difference when what we see helps us to think about what is possible for us. And what I think is really lovely is when we realize like, oh, like I didn't even know that was possible, or even an option, or I didn't know people like me could do or create or be or have something like that. Because we sometimes have ideas about like people like me, whether that's your career, your age, your gender, your ethnic background, like all the dimensions that you experience being a human. And so for me, when I left my career, which was the known world of corporate America, and that's how you generate a livelihood, and that's how you explain who you are in the world. And when I ventured out, one of the metaphors that really helped me was remembering, whenever I'm looking, I can only see kind of what my eyes can see. But there's this entire world outside of my peripheral vision that exists, but I actually don't know what it is because I can't see it yet. But every step I take on my path, the horizon line will change. So I will start to see more. Other people will come into view. I will start to have different kinds of conversations and see more. And so it helped me to know I don't have to have a perfect plan or even a perfect vision of where I'm going to. I just need to know that it's there. It's a little bit beyond what I can see. But I know the way to understand it more is to move towards where I'm feeling drawn to, because there's always more like behind you and around you than what you can see. I also sometimes think of this as ordering off the menu. Like we think the menu is all that's available. But for example, if you are an In-N-Out burger fan, you might know there's a secret menu. It's not printed anywhere, but if you ask for these other things, you can have them.
I just love hearing all of these different stories and the way the three of you have described this very complicated topic, and just the possibility that's there. I mean, really, the expansion is where we've gotten to, where we can go beyond the fear-based beliefs and get to this new place, this new menu that Kim's talking about. And we only have a few more minutes, so I'd love for each of you to, just share maybe one other thought you have on this topic. I know we could go on forever, whether it be a particular meditation practice that has really helped you with either identifying your limiting beliefs or expanding beyond them, or creating that heart space to help yourself through that journey from limiting belief to more expansion, or something else. So just opening it up for you each to kind of leave us with a parting thought. And maybe we'll start with Ranga.
Yeah. Cool. So I think I'll throw out a couple limiting beliefs with regards to how we view meditation. So one view is that meditation is all about concentration and focus. And I remember actually meeting someone in a corporate seminar who she it was actually really funny to me. She sort of said something like, "Oh, is meditation about concentration and focus and not thinking?" Like, I can't do that. And I was like, "No, it doesn't have to be." And she was like, "Oh, well, that's what I need." So it's funny how it's like we can get so jammed up, with how we even view meditation. And actually, Kim said something really important. I think she said when she first approached this or thought about this, she thought of it as weird. Like, oh, what is this weird meditation thing? So that's another limiting belief. Meditation is weird, or it's not me. I'm not a meditator. I'm not a yogi. I'm not spiritual. In another corporate seminar I remember meeting a gentleman who he walked in and saw him, and he was like, "Oh, meditation, is it like Om?" Right? And I immediately could tell in him saying that what he was expressing is that meditation was weird and that it wasn't something that was for him, right? So, when we actually close our eyes, we're not usually seeing an image of ourselves cross-legged with some mudra, right? Like, we're just closing our eyes. You know what I mean? So what I'm talking about here is, what is our image of a meditator? What is our belief and view of what meditation is all about? And I think this is so important. And it's so helpful when we start to embrace an image that feels right for us. So, in various schools of Buddhism, one thing I really like is, like in Tibetan Buddhism, or if you take Hinduism, and there's all these deities, male, female, some have green skin, blue skin, some embody compassion, others embody fierceness, or you can hear stories of historical figures in this time. Again, men and women, some were known for their wisdom, some were known for their love, their soft-spokenness, right? So it's helpful to start to find an image that compels us. And I'll mention a couple archetypes here. There's one of the hero, there's the warrior, there's the scientist who's experimenting, there's the artist who's moved by beauty, right? So in this idea of a limiting belief, there's also this idea of like images, limiting views. And then the flip side is enabling views and images and views that can empower us. So my last bit of encouragement here is to find an image, even if it's yourself, or if it's, the superhero in the latest Marvel movie, and one of my friends I was trying to find an image for a client, and we ended up finding a character from the Ted Lasso show, the female boss of this show, who's powerful and loving, right? Like, find an image of this practice, the spiritual path, or an image of whatever it is that you want in life that you can start to embrace, and see if in meditation, when you work with that image, just by being aware of the body and allowing that image to come through and be felt in your heart, see what that does to your view of what meditation practice is and what it can be. I know there's a lot there, but hopefully that was coherent.
I'll go next. I guess I'll share 3 things to think about. Name the story. claim it, like this is the story I'm telling myself right now, and then reframe it. So be curious, question it. What happens if I look at it this way? What if I'm actually completely wrong about this? Those three things, just to notice, like, can you name it? Can you observe it? Can you claim it? This is the story I'm telling, and then reframe it and have fun with it. Sometimes it feels like so heavy. I have a limiting belief. It can actually be kind of a playful way of experiencing yourself and your life. And so that's what I would recommend. And I will also just plug, I'm right now teaching a class Monday nights on self-care. So if you have limiting beliefs, like it's selfish, I don't have time, I don't know, like come to the self-care class on Monday nights this summer and we will get into it.
I love that. I love the story I'm telling myself is, gotta love Brene Brown for that one. So good. What I'll share to wrap us up is my thought that I forgot earlier. So this is a perfect wrap up here, is coming back to what Ranga was saying around giving your power away. And I think that's one of my favorite ways to identify limiting beliefs, is whenever you feel like just small, you feel yourself holding back, you feel yourself just not in your power. A practice that I like to ask myself is, what or who am I giving my power away to? Is it the belief that I have to work 8 hours a day to have a productive day? Whoa, okay, that's not actually in line with me. I'm going to go to the beach, right? So it's, what am I giving my power away to? Who am I giving my power away to when I start to feel myself shrink, hold back, be small, just like get knocked out of my lane of alignment? And by labeling that, we realize, oh yeah, maybe it's this belief that actually doesn't resonate with me, or maybe it's this person's limiting belief around how they think I should be in the world. And it's just kind of little pathways to come back to you in your center. So I'll leave us with that one.
So much there to go away with. So who am I giving my power away to? Naming and claiming the story. And then Ranga, I love this idea of the image, coming up with an image of who I am as a meditator. What's that image that really empowers me and feels right to me? So I'm actually going to do all three. I'm going to practice with all three of your suggestions. I love it. And I hope everybody watching tries it out and does the same, and takes Kim's idea of being curious about it and maybe not so heavy about it, and just seeing what happens. And before we leave each other, I would also just like to plug for one of our other teachers, Sanal Kalra. She has a 5-day meditation retreat coming up July 21st to the 25th. And that's in Dedham, Massachusetts, where I've never been there, but I think it's close to Boston. And you can find all the information on it on our Within website under retreats. And please join her. I mean, she's going to have meditation, she's going to have yoga, she's got a couple other teachers teaching with her, and one of our very own students, who I think has almost been here since the beginning of Within's time, Danielle Goldberg, is also putting on that retreat with her, which is really exciting. So just plugging that, and just overall, I'm so grateful for this conversation, for the stories you all shared, and the way that you helped us really understand what limiting beliefs are, how to identify them, how to work with them, and how to break beyond them, and see what's possible in our lives when we do. So really grateful to all of you, and just like to say thank you. And maybe on the count of 3, we can come off mute, and we can all just wave or say goodbye or whatever feels good to you. And so 1, 2, 3. Thanks
Thank you.
all.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It was wonderful.